To demonstrate the ranking and weighted ranking methods, let's revisit our example of buying a flight from Washington, D.C. to Houston. We have our matrix which shows our flight options and our criteria. We've also filled in the table to show how each option fares with respect to the criteria we identified. In simple ranking, we look at how each flight option performs against an individual criterion. Then we rank the options on a scale relative to one another. For this example, we can use the scale 1 to 5, where 1 is bad and 5 is excellent, but in practice you can use whatever scale works best. Looking at our first criterion, price, let's rank each flight where 1 is expensive and 5 is cheap. We can see that the Spirit flight is the cheapest at $300, so we give this option a 5 and rank the rest of the flights accordingly. For travel time, we'll assign values where 1 is a long flight and 5 is a short flight. The first 3 alternatives are all short, so they get a 5. The Delta flight is longest, so it gets a 1. And Southwest is in between, so we'll assign a 3. For number of stops, we'll assign a 5 to nonstop flights like the first 3 alternatives, a 1 to Delta, which has the most stops, and a 3 to Southwest. For schedule, only Spirit gets a 5 since it's very convenient, Southwest gets a 1 since it's not convenient, and the rest get a 3. Finally, for distance to the airport, we'll give a 5 to the American and Delta flights, a 1 to Spirit and Southwest, and a 4 to United since it's close. Finally, we tally the total points for each alternative, and the option with the most points wins. Using simple rankings, the Spirit flight, which is also the cheapest flight, wins. You may have already noticed that this process is a bit strange, in that it gives equal importance to each criteria. What about cases where, for example, you care more about closeness to departing airport than you do about price? Weighted rankings allow you to reflect your priorities and in turn arrive at a flight that better matches your preferences and needs. With weighted rankings, we use the same process to rank each flight option as before, but we weight the criteria differently in order to reflect our personal preferences. The higher the weight, the more important that criteria is to you. For example, if you value expediency more than anything, then you could apply greater weight to travel time and number of stops in addition to distance to the airport, and by extension apply less weight to schedule in addition to price. In the end, all the weights must add to 100. Here are some sample weights based on the preferences we just expressed. To apply these weights, we multiply each value by its weight and add them up. Here's the math for the first flight, and we'll just fill in the final weighted score for the rest of them. When we incorporate these weights, we arrive at a different flight than when we valued all criteria equally. In this case, the American Airlines flight wins. Although it's the most costly and doesn't depart at a convenient time, it's the quickest and departs from the closest airport. Note that your matrix might look different since you assigned different weights to the criteria than we just did. That's exactly the point. Weighted rankings allow you to customize your decision matrix to better capture your own preferences.